Welcome to everyone who is participating in this webinar. My name is Jenny Cafiso. I'm the Director of Canadian Jesuits International, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to our webinar, A Just Future for All, Accompanying Forcibly Displaced People in Colombia. I can see that the number of participants is people are logging in, and so it's great that in the next few minutes there might be others coming on board as well. We have people from across Canada, and we have some people also from different parts of the world that are joining us today, and so you're all welcome. Just a couple of things to ensure a smooth webinar. To avoid distractions, everyone's microphone will be muted and the videos will be turned off. We encourage you to type your questions anytime during the webinar in the question and answer box and not in the chat box. And we will ask the questions at the end on your behalf for both presenters. The session is going to be recorded, and so all those people who have registered, even the ones who are not able to attend today, will receive a link for the recording within 24 hours. So A Just Future for All is the name that CJI, Canadian Jesuits International, has given to our 2020 Giving Tuesday campaign. The purpose of the campaign is to highlight the work of our Jesuit partners in Africa, Asia, and Latin America, who are addressing the inequities and social cracks that are being exposed by COVID-19. We are making a special appeal at this time to respond to the needs of the most marginalized people who are most impacted by the pandemic: women, migrants, Indigenous people. And so for this, we need your help. We have a campaign goal of $150,000, and today's webinar is the second of 3 webinars that bring the voice of our partners. We've asked our partners in South Sudan, in Colombia, and in India to speak to you, to a Canadian and international audience, about the work that they're doing on the ground. Before I introduce our speakers, and though we're all in very different locations, I would like to acknowledge the land on which we stand. This is a practice in Canada in a recognition of the presence of Indigenous people in the past and present, and the need to work for Indigenous justice. So since we're hosting in Toronto, we acknowledge the land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat people, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. I also want to take a moment of silence or prayer to remember and honor all those who are mourning someone who they've lost, or those who are sick, or those who are afraid, and those who are dying of hunger because of COVID-19. So today, we're happy to have with us Father Mauricio Garcia Duran and Juana Potes, both in Bogota. They join us from Bogota, Colombia. So we will begin with Father Mauricio, who will say just a few words about the context in Colombia in which JRS works, and followed by Juana's presentation on the work of JRS Colombia, accompanying forcibly displaced people in the country with a focus on a very specific project that they're working on. So I start with Father Mauricio, who is a Jesuit priest. He has a BA in political science and theology, an MA in philosophy, and a PhD in peace studies from the University of Bradford in UK. Father Mauricio has spent the last 30 years doing research and advocacy on peace process and social mobilization for peace in Colombia. participating in some of the peace initiatives in the country. In addition, he has worked on programs with displaced populations with CINEP, which is a Jesuit Center for Research and Popular Education, and the Jesuit Refugee Service. Currently, Father Mauricio is the JRS Country Director in Colombia and was the Regional Director in for Latin America between 2016 and 2019. He has published 7 books and 75 articles or chapters on these topics that we're speaking about today. He's also a longtime friend and companion in the journey. I think Mauricio is probably better if I don't say how long we have known each other, but let's say that it's more than 2 decades for sure.
Yeah, it
and,
is.
Yes, when we met in Colombia, actually, I think the first time. So welcome, Mauricio, to our webinar today. And I give the words over to you.
Thank you, Jenny, and thank you, Canadian Jesuit International, for this invitation at this webinar. Well, I only want to make a very few remarks on the situation of conflict and forced displacement in Colombia, because the important presentation is Juana's presentation later on the project we are developing in Magdalena Medio region. I want to say basically 3 things. The first one is that the armed conflict continues in Colombia, despite the peace agreement that was signed with FARC in 2016. The application of the agreements has been limited, with points whose development is still very low for 4 years later. The disinterest of some political actors in making the peace agreement effective adds to the survival of different armed actors in making the peace agreement effective, and the survival of different armed actors that continue to be responsible for the increasing level of violence that the country is experiencing again. And only to mention, we have an active guerrilla group that is ELN, the National Liberation Army. Secondly, we have a new generation of paramilitary groups which emerged from the mobilization of the paramilitary group between 2003 and 2006. The mobilization was never complete. We have dissident groups from the guerrilla that have signed the peace agreements. A small dissidents of the Popular Liberation Army, EPL, from the FARC in 2016. Some did not enter in the peace process at all, and others have returned to armed activity. And then all these groups are connected with drug trafficking, illegal mining, and smuggling. In some cases, there is a presence of Mexican drugs cartels in Colombia. One of the most critical expressions of this violence of all these groups is given by the large number of the mobilized people killed. 236 signed the peace agreements, and of the social leaders, 1,055 signed the signing of the peace accord. This is really a very critical situation. One clear consequence of the continuity of these levels of violence and armed conflict is the internal displacement that continues in the country. We still have internal displaced people, IDPs, especially in some areas where the these groups are located. Colombia, according to UNHCR, continues to be the first country in the world with the highest number of internally displaced persons of approximately 8 million people. There was a decrease of the level of displacement in 2016, but it remains a very significant level with nearly 400,000 internally displaced persons in the last 4 years. One fact is that intra-urban, the displacement in the cities is growing in the last 4 years. And as we are experiencing in Magdalena Medio, specifically in Barrancabermeja, when the project that we are going to present is located. So this is what I wanted to say. There is the continuation of the armed conflict, of the high level of violence, and secondly, there is still internal displaced people, a new internal displaced people. And this is the context in which we are doing our work. So I give the word to Juana.
Thank you very much, Mauricio. That was a very amazing way to summarize a very complex situation, but I think it sets the stage for then understanding the work that JRS is doing and that Juana is going to speak about now. So it's my great pleasure to introduce Juana Potes, who is the Program Officer of Jesuit Refugee Service Colombia. And Juana is responsible for accompanying the various JRS projects in the country that they're implementing in different locations, both with the design and implementation of the projects, ensuring that they meet the needs of forcibly displaced people in Colombia. As they have already said, and she will mention, JRS has been present in the country for several decades. She is also a political scientist and an anthropologist. She has worked with indigenous people, Afro-descendant communities, farmers, children, and university students. And I know that she brings a lot of skills, passion, and most of all, commitment to this work. And so I thank Juana for being with us today, for all that you do, and for the presentation. Over to you.
Thank you, Jenny, and thank you to CGI for these invitations. So I will share with you my screen right now. So as Jenny was saying, well, my name is Juana Potes. I am the Programs Officer of JRS Colombia, and here I want to show you and share with you our experience accompanying forcibly displaced people in Colombia, especially in this project supported by this Canadian Justice International Funds of Women's Empowerment in Barrancabermeja. So for a start, I would like to say that the JRS has been working in Colombia for 25 years, accompanying forcibly displaced people, refugees, migrants, and local communities. Throughout a comprehensive approach that includes the humanitarian aid assistance, the prevention of conflicts and peace-building processes, and the local integration, reconciliation, and hospitality culture. All with a cross-sectional view of public and communitary advocacy that allows us make visible these populations' vulnerabilities, risks, and lack of protection and adequate response from the government to those needs. The JRS Colombia works in 6 offices all over the country, 5 of them with direct implementation of protection actions with the beneficiaries, and 1 national office for administrative management. Today, I would like to invite you all to take a trip with me. And this trip will be taking off from Toronto, headed to Colombia. So we are here at South America, in the north part of South America. You find Colombia. So Colombia, we're here on the north part, has faced historically a set of challenges. First, the internal armed conflict. Second, massive flow of Venezuelan refugees and migrants. And third, inequality and poverty across the country. So in Colombia, according to the Victims Unique Registry, there are over 9 million people recognized as victims and included in the registry. From those, over 8 million suffered internal forced displacement, which represents the 89% of the total recognized victims. Here, following the Kroc Institute for International Peace Studies' fourth report of the state of the implementation of the Colombian Peace Accord, 3 years after the signing of the peace agreement, only the 25% of the dispositions have been completed. 15% are in a medium state, and 34% at the minimum state of advance. And the last 26% of it have not even started to be implemented. As Mauricio was saying, the number of victims registered in the last 5-year periods has certainly decreased after the signing of the agreement. However, since the signing of the peace agreement with the FARC guerrilla back in 2016, there are more than 400,000 new internally displaced people due to conflicts between different illegal armed groups and the government forces. At the same time, 236 former FARC guerrilla members have been killed after the peace accord. Likewise, over 254 leaders, human rights defenders. Additionally, in this United Nations report of global trends of the migration and internal displacement, Colombia ranks as the second country with the largest number of refugees in the world after Turkey, which hosts 3.9 million, mostly from Syria. Colombia hosted in 2019 around 1.8 million of Venezuelans, where 1 million of them are in an irregular migrant status in Colombia. About the third aspect, obviously Colombia has one of the highest inequality coefficient of the region, greater than 0.5, that has been worsened by the COVID-19 pandemic situation, increasing poverty and unemployment. So let's continue our trip from Toronto. Now we will be landing at Bogota, the capital city of Colombia, where Mauricio and I are in this moment. And now we have to take another plane or go through land to the northern part of the country, to the Santander's department, where Barrancabermeja is located over the Magdalena Medio region on the Magdalena River. So here at Barrancabermeja, in the Santander's department, is where we develop our project. And I would like to share some points about it. Barrancabermeja is called the beautiful daughter of the sun due to its very warm weather, but also known for its resistance. As a consequence of its historical trajectory, this city is known because it is the center of the biggest oil refinery of the country, and around it, the capacity for social organization, labor, and union rights defense. The city of Barrancabermeja in Magdalena Medio region has suffered impacts of the internal conflict, armed conflict, through decades, but also it is a story of local-based organizations resisting. As a result of the armed groups, many people of the local population has been forced out of their territory. And also the city has received forced displaced population from all over the country. According to the Unique Victims Registry, nowadays Barrancabermeja has over 48,000 recognized victims living there. 3 out of 10 are victims of forced internal displacement. Also, as a result of the phenomenon of forced migration in Venezuela, Barrancabermeja is hosting around 6,174 migrant people according to June's report of Migración Colombia. Given the demographic dynamics, this city has grown and the highest number of IDPs and migrants have settled at the borders, occupying without a legal tenant's property documentation. Those neighborhoods is where we find the story of these wonderful women, supported obviously by the generous funds of CGI. Since 2018, the JRS Colombia has started a work focused on the promotion of local empowerment processes based on the communitarian perspective. Back in that time, the approach prioritized the work with women, reinforcing their abilities on active participation, development, and reconciliation. Following the invitation of the 35th General Congregation of the Jesuits, we promote the sense of being a fire that kindles other fires, others that are diverse and plural. As the center, we identify the specific needs of women and individuals and as part of their communities, addressing the difficulties and violations they suffer on their private and public spheres of life. And to do that, we have to embrace the gender inequalities present in Barrancabermeja's culture that has systematically generate exclusion for women and have pretty violent expressions against them. So in order to do so, we needed to include all members of the community, including men, children, and elderly people, so they could be all fires that kindles other fires. Throughout this process, we talk about women's and children's rights, the identification and prevention of risks at their territories, and the institutional channels to report any of those violations. The gender and leadership school developed with these communities allowed women to recognize their own abilities and possibilities of change, but also the opportunity to get in touch and create partnerships with other women and organizations of the region and replicate their experiences to extend their learnings obtained by this process. The work, as I said at the beginning, is community-based, and that requires the acknowledgement and reinforcement of the sense of belonging to that territory and community. To materialize that together, they designed a plan to transform their realities to support the local integration and self-determination of the residents. They prioritize the communal areas of their neighborhoods and agree to cooperate between each other to reach their collective goals. This is very important because the social ties and the social relations were pretty bad affected by the conflict. So trust, working together and creating empathy is difficult for these people. So we had to address those needs and to be able to build together and have all this sense of communitarian work. And also we know the impact of that economic conditions can have over the lives of each family group. But also to prevent xenophobic outbreaks, it's necessary to include in our comprehensive accompaniment approach these capital seed strategies for all three populations that we work with: internal displaced people, Venezuelan migrants, and host communities. And those experiences in a mixed territory with these three populations live together requires the hospitality culture approach. We need to be and enhance the possibility to be empathic to each other's lives and journeys, hopes, fears, and dreams with all these stories and history of violence, of fractures, of places, belongings, and families have suffered, and try to put it in a resilience way to be. This year also, the COVID-19 has affected the accompanied population's realities as well as our work strategies. The difficult economic conditions of these people that live from the day of work, the daily sales, got worsened by the local administration's restrictions to mobility and the lack of social security processes that guarantee those minimums of life of them. The basic humanitarian needs increased mainly around food security and safe shelter because people were the fear to be evicted when they could not reach end of the month with the rent's money. Our comprehensive approach had to respond to those needs and adapt the strategies articulating humanitarian aid, continuing with the capacity building support and livelihood sustainability plan. This through present work with all the biosecurity measures from us as the accompagners, but also the population we are accompanying, because we had to be sure that we will not be a transmission of the virus focus, and they will be protected as well as we and our families as collaborators, but also through these technological and digital strategies that had also its barriers of access of TICs, of the ITs, capacities, technologies, and everything around it in these impoverished communities. So we have been able to keep continuing our strategies. This is something very important for us because besides other organizations and after everything that has happened this year, the JRS Colombia have not closed its doors, have not stopped. The JRS has continuing accompanying their population in all the ways we've been able to do it. So this year, the JRS is celebrating 25 years of hard work in Colombia, and we reassure our commitment of accompany, serve, and advocate the vulnerable people, and the call of the Holy Father Francisco to welcome, to protect, to promote, and to integrate migrants, refugees, internally displaced people, and victims of the violence. For this, we thank the generous support we have received from donors, people, women and men who believe in our work, in our job, and are convinced to continue this walkway to make a just future for all. Thank you very much. And I would like to share with you a short video of our some experiences and phrases of the women we have been supported through all this process. So I will share with you right now. I hope you'll enjoy it.
De verdad que le doy gracias a Dios por ponerlos a ustedes en el camino, todo el grupo de ustedes de trabajo de los jesuitas. Y sí, nos ha dado una gran enseñanza, ser como más tolerante y ser como mejor persona. No quiere decir que seamos malas personas, pero hay momentos como que ser uno como que todo agrio así. Hay momentos que muchas veces pasa así, como ser antipático. Pero usted nos ha dejado una gran enseñanza y cada vez que nos reunimos nos deja algo de enseñanza. Cada vez que nos da, mejor dicho. Y sobre los cursos, excelente, me fascina.
Para poder lograr este objetivo, estamos, pues gracias a Dios que hace un tiempo llegó a este barrio los líderes de jesuitas, que gracias a ellos hemos cumplido este proyecto, nos han dado mucho apoyo, de pronto lo que hemos necesitado.
Ser mujer es difícil, ser mamá es más difícil aún, pero sí, es un privilegio de ser mujer y ser mamá.
Con el SJR siempre hemos trabajado como aprender un poquito más uno mismo, porque la verdad pues no sabía, he aprendido paso a paso con ustedes y eso, gestionar para ayudar, para mejorar el barrio, para mejorar la calidad de vida de todos, no solamente la mía, la de todos. Eso me parece ser líder.
Sí, porque nos han enseñado a luchar por lo que queremos, por obtener y como más unión entre las vecinas y más entre mujeres, más comprensión, más respeto.
Que la gente aprenda a respetar y a valorarse entre sí misma. Dando ejemplo y dándonos a conocer, porque si uno da y les demuestra que uno puede y que es capaz de salir adelante, pues yo creo que de alguna manera tiene que servir esto para un buen ejemplo.
Se va.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much, Juana. That was a very good, concise presentation of a very of a complex project that deals with very, very complex issues. I'd like to invite Juana and Mauricio to turn their camera on. And I would also like to invite our participants to ask questions. We already have a few, which I'm going to start asking to our panelists. And but those of you who are listening, please, there is a question and answer section at the very bottom of your screen, Q&A. And so please add your question to that, and we will collect them and answer that and ask our panelists to answer them. And I'm really glad that you finished with that video, which brings the voice of the women that you work with to us. So there are a couple of questions relating to the role of women, and there is some relating to the Colombia context and the peace accord. So let me start for Juana. Well, you both can answer, of course. So one question is, are the women whom JRS accompanies responsible primarily for themselves, or do they have dependents, minors or seniors that are with them? Or in the case of the refugees, do they have dependents, that is minors or seniors that they're responsible for that are left behind in Venezuela? So I don't know if Juana or Mauricio would like to answer that.
Juana.
Okay, thank you. So, yes, here at Barrancabermeja's process, we have these women are responsible from their children. The most of them, they have families in charge. They're already being focused on prioritized because they don't have another network of support besides their neighbors, their community network. So they already have these links created in order to support their families. But yeah, I think that all of them have children in charge, also elderly people. In the case of Venezuelan migrants, women have left behind children. We have this case of they come here first in order to settle down, and then once they have like this minimum base achieved here, they can bring their children and their mothers and grandfathers from Venezuela to here. Some of them even like settle here, makes all the migration process returning to Venezuela and then coming with them. So we have one leaving the country and then three coming back to Colombia to have already the economic and the house situation settled for them.
Okay, thank you. Yes?
No, I will say only that in the case of displaced people, normally there are many women with responsibilities for the family, because some of the men have been killed or some of the men have been left or whatever. So in these cases, there are many women who are responsible for sustaining the family.
Right, that's right. Thank you. There's another question related on the issue of question of women. There's a question was, what are some specific examples of how the Jesuit Refugee Service, through your programming, are trying to change the culture of male chauvinism and the underlying violence of misogyny?
Okay, so the baseline that we have to do at that point is that we work together with women and men as well, because we cannot change that culture just working with the women. We have known that this culture has been reproducing through generations. So we involve also the children, women and men, to introduce these concepts and just talk about what they have been living and experiencing as women, as men, how they treat each other, how their gender-based roles are distributed, and then we can work for a more comprehensive way of seeing how we would like to be and how we would like to relate each other. And that includes also the economic part of who is taking care of the children, who is taking care of the house, who is cooking, who is working outside, and trying to make this reflection of how we associate women and men in society, and how would like to change it together, and not just trying to be an external actor saying what should you be doing, because that's just violent with the culture. We are trying to make a process of dialoguing, trying to make these reflections, make this highlighting these aspects of how we want to build a more horizontal relations between each other through, of course, education, through involving men, women, and children in the conversation of these public and private aspects. We, of course, have these special workshops or specific workshops to be able to talk about women's rights and women's channels of rights accessibility here in Colombia.
I will add something that is a key aspect in our work is to empower people, is to make people able to be an actor or his or her own alternatives. So in this sense, when we work with women, we are focused in that they can be actors of their own life. So this implies a transformation in many sense. and sometimes implies some conflicts with men because things start to change. But we try to connect this with a community perspective in order that people can work together, but that women can have their rights, as Juana has said. And so this is very important to empower people in order that they can be actors of their own development.
Thank you. Well, that leads us to a couple of questions. This question of empowering people, which is key to the work that JRS Colombia does. And it leads me to two questions, which are for both of you to answer, relating to hope and to the future. So one question is, and I will ask them separately, but they're for both of you. What is your hope and the hope of the people that you work with, I would add? And they ask, the person who is asking this question, where do you find hope? Because of the resurgence of violence and displacement, as well as the lack of cooperation from the current Colombian government with regards to the implementation of the peace agreement. So the question is, given the current resistance to the implementation of the peace agreement, the current government, where do you and the people that you work with find hope? And then I have a subsequent question, which I will ask after this. Either one of you.
Well, I will introduce the answer. For me, the most important thing, and this was, we could see this in the short video, is the capacity of being with others. When you are with others, when there is solidarity, when you are working together, you can see things in a completely different way. And you find there the hope. You have there the possibility to believe that something is possible to do together, and that they are not condemned by the violence. So this is critical for me. And you find this when, and I have discovered this myself, going to share with people and being there. And when you discover that a situation that really shocked me, people can resignify this situation because they are together and because they are working as a community, because they are trying to find a solution to one another. And this is really a quite important thing.
Yeah, I would just add that we as JRS Colombia find our hope in the people. They like full us of hope of this working together, and also how we as working on the territory, like hand to hand to them, we sit and we live and we establish the office with the communities. We create these bonds, we create this working together with this cooperation and resilience together with them, and they have shown us that this is possible. They have this history of resistance and they want to continue. They will not stop, even if the government's like institutional purpose are not this. We have to strengthen the civil society in doing so.
Thank you. That's very powerful what you both have said, and this relates to what you were saying earlier about the empowerment of the communities. There are many questions that people are asking, which is fantastic, and we're going to try to we're trying to group them together and ask as many as we can, and the ones we don't get to, we will answer them afterwards. So this question is addressed specifically to Juana. Of course, both of you can answer, but it relates to this particular point we were just discussing around the hope for the future. And the question is, if you asked these women that you work with, where or how do you see yourself or imagine your life as women in the next 10 or 20 years? Where do you see your life and how do you visualize it in 10 to 20 years? What would they say? And if you if they haven't answered that question for you, what would you like to hear from them? What do you think you would like to hear as an answer as you work with them? And of course, the person concludes that question by thanking you for the work that you do and congratulations for the service of the people of Magdalena. So Juana, do you wanna start that?
Okay, so we have asked these women this currently because what we do it just building with them. So what would you like to do? What you have in mind? What you would like to learn? What would you like to be here from here and 5 years on? So they have answered us that they want to be autonomous. This is something that they highlights. They have economic autonomy, but also the making decisions for themselves in their personal life, but also in their political lives. So they constantly also reflects on their children. So what they want from 10 years to now is that they are not raising children for the war. They're not building these little armed people from now to this year. So they want to assure the living conditions for them and their families, their children, guarantee the different conditions of life for them, to be autonomous and to be also stronger together. They want to be constantly constructing this notion of the collective good, and that they could be more working together side by side and be able to have their future change from a past of violence. And they also refer to armed violence, but like the internal conflict, but also the urban conflict, the drug situation, also like the gang violence in city. I mean, they are reaching all the different kinds of violence they have facing in their lives.
Great, thank you. Is there anything you wanted to add, Mauricio?
No.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. A slightly different topic. Somebody's asking about whether you're involved in doing any housing, in creating new housing options for the people, for the internally displaced people. And if so, are you using any form of collective management of the housing and involving the residents in supporting each other?
Okay, so as I was presenting, we have this comprehensive approach of accompaniment where we reach like the humanitarian needs, the prevention and local integration. In these humanitarian needs, we have shelter, like one of our subsectors that we work with. We do have these conversations about having a safe and secure shelter for people where their living conditions are the best. We have from various international cooperation funds, we would reach all these rent or having the better conditions for the houses they already have. And also we have this strategy of building together as a community their enhancement of their houses. So we support through the materials or the elements like the equipment we need in order to have that made. We realize that we cannot have local integration or life dignity without a safe housing support. So we do it, it's different, our approach from migrants and internally displaced, but we do not want to generate or create xenophobic reactions. So we have to build this communitary perspective of how we work together to have the collective good. Just not to have these tensions between all the communities, because as you said, it's the same place where we have three communities living together.
Okay, thank you. Right. There's a question around internally displaced. So one of our participants is asking, saying that in Colombia, in addition to being a host country for Venezuelan refugees, it's also a source of a source country for refugees itself. It has been for many years. And so the question is, are all internally displaced people able to find a durable solution within another part of Colombia, or are some of them forced to flee Colombia? And either one of you can take that question.
Well,
or both.
I will say, nowadays we have different situation in that regard. The first things in previous years, normally there were people going out from Colombia to Venezuela mainly, but also to Ecuador and to Panama, for example. And other people going further to other countries, to the United States, to Chile, to Brazil, to Spain, for example. But nowadays, are less people leaving the country because the number of displaced people are less quantity than before. But the other point is that we have now many Venezuelans coming in. So in some way, there is a competition in that regard. In Venezuela, nowadays, it's impossible to be. So many of the Colombians that went to Venezuela in the past are coming back with the Venezuelans that are leaving their country. So we have this situation right now. In Ecuador, still there are a few going to Ecuador. And this is a difficult situation, but the focus nowadays is certainly connected with migrants, forced migrants coming from Venezuela. This is the main focus. And one critical situation with displaced people is that many people can stabilize because they are obligated to migrate again, to live, to displace again within the cities, because they arrive to a neighborhood and there are the risks of forced recruitment of the children. So they live again and again, and you could find people that the first displacement were 10 years ago, and now they have displaced again 3 or 4 times. So they remain as a chronic displaced person. And this is one of the critical situations we are facing in projects like we are showing today to you all.
Okay, right, thank you. Perhaps related to that, even though you mentioned it earlier, but there have been a couple of questions around COVID, how COVID is impacting the whole movement of people or the whole situation. And in particularly, someone asked, how has COVID-19 affected Colombia's immigration reform when it comes, as it relates to Venezuelan migrants? So generally speaking, the impact of COVID in Colombia, on your work, and around immigration or the reception of migrants. Either one of you can take the question.
I can start and Juana will follow. I will say a very simple thing. COVID has affected us in a very deep way. Why? Because we have to move from an attention to people in our offices to a more remote presence and connection by internet, in association with some of our providers of food or other things. So this has implied a change. Also, we had 5 people of our team that were affected by COVID. Thanks to God, nothing serious happened, but this implied a more measures for security in the sense. And the other point is connected with the presence of Venezuelans. Many Venezuelans, well, 100,000 went back to Venezuela, given that they were facing a very difficult situation, unable to work and unable to have any food, any shelter, and so on. But now these Venezuelans are coming back, and even the government considered that at least 2 Venezuelans are coming back for each of one that went back. So in this moment, we expect to have at least 300,000 Venezuelans more in Colombia in the coming months, and this make an effect. And one consequence from this is that there is a rising level of xenophobia, because people are 2 very vulnerable communities, and there is some competition for the resources. So when you find this, many Colombians in a very poor situation are starting to refuse Venezuelans and to say Venezuelans are problematic for us because they are taking what is for us, the resources and the aid that we can receive. So this is part of the situation. I don't know if Juana wants to say something.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that it impacts on health, because we have a pretty bad health system for Colombians, even more for Venezuelan migrants, because if in Colombia we do not have this health attendance to migrants just only for urgencies. We do not have any other health like insurance or anything for migrants in irregular migration status. Also the economic, because they work in the day to day. I mean, what they could make that day of work, they would pay. Shelter, because they were paying rent or just the day of night in a place. And if they couldn't work, they were like evicted. So those aspects affected directly due to COVID. And also because it was associated, the Venezuelans, the migrants, with the infection. So they said Venezuelan migrants are infected and they're going to infect us. And this is a topic of Venezuelans are crossing. They have irregular paths of crossing from Venezuela to Colombia that are restricted by armed groups, but they pass all the time. I mean, even if the legal border is closed, they're passing all the time. And those paths, irregular paths, do not have the health like guarantee that they are not infected or not. So the association and the visibility that has been passing in media is that Venezuelans are infected. So that has increased the xenophobia in Colombia.
Okay, well, Very interesting. There are a few other questions that some of them, well, all of them very interesting questions. It is 1:59. We usually try to end our webinars on time because people are just sometimes taking time over lunch before they, well, not that anybody's going anywhere, but you may have other things to do during COVID time. So I just would like to say a couple of sort of concluding remarks, but then invite people who do have another 5 minutes to stay on so that we can, so that Mauricio and Juana can answer the questions that we haven't had a chance to address. We'll just go on for another 5 or 10 minutes maximum. But in the meantime, for those people who do need to go, I just want to, first of all, thank you all for coming and joining us for this second webinar. As for those of you who have been to both the one on South Sudan and this one, you can see how powerful it is to hear the voices of the people who are working right on the ground and who are living day to day the reality of violence, the impact of COVID, and the impact of inequality and injustice. I also want to thank our speakers for taking the time to prepare. As you can see, they have prepared a lot, but most of all for the amazing commitment that they have to the people and the work that they do over many, many years. I also want to invite people to visit our website for more information. We're not finished in our series of our campaign. We have another webinar called Just Future for All, Resisting a Democracy Recession, that is going to be on November 24th with Father Xavier JRS. And we're also going to have a panel of people who will respond to him to look at the whole issue of democracy today. Father JRS is from India, and he's currently the Secretary of the Office for Justice and Ecology in Rome. And then on December 1st, we conclude the series with an event called Just Gratitude, where we have invited various artists from Venezuela to South Sudan, dancers and singers, to have an event, a virtual event of to say thanks to everyone. So that should be a lot of fun, and we hope you join us. I also want to encourage you to join our campaign, to support our campaign. The funds that we collect will go to these projects. And so you can check our website for more details. And so we wish people well, and we continue to work for solidarity, safety, well-being, and hope. And having said that, for those people who are still with us, and there's quite a few, I'm just going to ask just a couple of other questions that were raised. One is, what would need to happen for the peace accord to be fully implemented and fighting to stop in Colombia? And this is a question for both of you. Simple question.
It's not easy answer. Say we will need, to be honest, a most supported government for the agreement. Without this is quite difficult. But on the other hand, I think that we also need more mobilization for peace in favor of the agreement. As you know, peace can be built from bottom up to top down, and I think the agreement is more a top down alternative. But we need to emphasize that we need also a bottom up alternative, and this is necessary to build in every community, in every part of the country, and try to help that everyone can move to build this path with a new culture of peace, with a new alternative, economic alternatives, a political participation, and so on, connected, and to implement a deep process of reconciliation in the country. So we need to work in both sides, a top-down approximation, and in this we need that the government really take seriously the peace agreement, and the other is to build from the bottom peace initiatives in all the country.
Okay. Juana, did you want to say something?
Just adding that we are trying our best with public and community advocacy, because we know that we are this civil society organization needs to be speaking to the government and saying we need with the public, with the government, we have to make sure they are listening to us, but also the community-based advocacy where we reach the reconciliation culture, the hospitality, but also this culture of creating peace, enhancing peace, and doing it in our daily basis.
Okay, thank you very much. That's fantastic. There's a lot of work to be done in all our countries, really, to build that bottom-up participation. And this, in some ways, I think this is an element of this next question. One of our participants is asking about education. What education is available for displaced youth, and especially for girls? And in some ways, I'm saying this is, I'm adding myself, that it's related to this last point, because we need education. We need people to exercise their full right in order to build that participation and that democratic process. So I don't know if either one of you want to comment on that, of what education is available for displaced youth, and especially girls.
Okay, so in Barrancabermeja, we have this, when it's about of Colombian people, we have more capacity and opportunities. Sadly, with migrants, it's not the same story. So we have to make a lot of legal processes in order to assure that migrant girls get their school, like they can be able to go to school and have all the opportunities as well as the Colombians. But even then, we have these rural are not so developed cities, a pretty poor education system. So this is hard also here at Barrancabermeja, even if it's a city that mobilizes a lot of money because of the oil company, petroleum, they have also these gaps and pretty big like obstacles to reach a very good education in Colombia. We have to make sure that all girls are right at the school at the time that they need to be, because also we have these early pregnancies on women. So this is also a factor that has caused that women are not going to school because they get pregnant very young. So we have to make all this educational process of also reproductive rights and human rights, and understanding the importance of education with girls in these communities.
Okay.
I will only add that normally us as JRS support more informal education processes more than formal education processes. Sometimes people can access to formal education, especially in major cities, but normally in this context of displaced people or the forced migrants, it's necessary and most important to have informal processes that help them to empower themselves and to participate in different social processes, included economic processes.
Okay. All right, maybe just a couple of other questions before we close this part, because I know some people are leaving. We have a couple of questions around the work with women. And one is somebody was asking, that you speak mostly about women being on their own. And so the question is, are they married? Are their husbands? Are they like women-led families? Are the men disappeared or dead, or are they in paramilitary groups? And so just wanting to understand a little bit more the situation of some of the women you work with. And then another question, which I'll put them together for a question of time, which comes from Mercedes, who is our programs coordinator, who is on maternity leave. And I'm not sure whether this question is hers or is little Sophia, her little baby, was asking this. And the question is, the comment is, could you talk more about the gender equality work that you're doing, particularly with men? How responsive and open are they to this kind of work? So either maybe maybe Juana, if you want to start, and then Mauricio.
Okay, so there's a lot of there are women that are married and they have their husbands and their children and their parents, but all the men are mostly working with the oil company base that they're in Barranca. So their roles are that the man is always working in long shifts, turns, and everything. So the women are in charge of the house, of the children, the food, everything that comes with that notion of women at the house. Also, as Mauricio was saying, some of the women are widowed because of the armed conflict. The husband was killed, kidnapped, or disappeared. That's also a situation, and that's one of the process of creating memory and reconciliation process with these victims and their families. Also, there are just women that have their children and they're alone in charge of the house, and no husband ever appeared. Sometimes just the pregnancy moment, and that was it. So they have to reach their lives as they could. So those. In Barrancabermeja, we have all three cases. It's not just one of them. And also this connects with the question of how we work with masculinities, I don't know how to say it, with men.
Right.
Because because this is hard. This is a culture that is not used to recognize women's rights, girls' rights. So they have resistance, and they have been putting obstacles to have these conversations. But the main base of our work is to have these communitarian talks. Like, okay, let's sit together and have these talks about how we do it, how we want to do it, the different kinds of people we have, and how you could recognize the role that your wife has been doing through all these years, the role of the children. So we used to work mostly with men, trying them to be like sensible to the differences between women and men, and how women have been facing different violences. And this has been able to walk through a more progressive approach of new masculinities, or everything that show us how different can be a man, and how he could experience differently his masculinity, something like that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Mauricio, did you want to add anything to that?
I think this is, I only want to say this is a real challenge we face. And it's not easy, even with indigenous people we work with. because sometimes we probably we don't understand completely the way of thinking of them, but it's not easy the manage of the role of women within the indigenous communities. So we have had some difficulties both in the border with Venezuela, but also in the Pacific coast. We have faced this situation. But I think this is the challenge, and something that we need to work and try to put this in a communitarian perspective, in a way that so only when people work together and people start to discover possibilities, they are more open to these initiatives. But this sometimes is a step by step in order to go further in this sense.
All right, thank you so much. I think we're going to sort of wrap it up now. There was just a couple of people have asked about where else JRS works in Colombia, whether you work in Medellin. I don't know if you could quickly say the five, I think it's 5 locations that you work in Colombia. Could you mention them?
Yeah, okay, so from north to south, we are at Cúcuta, Norte de Santander. We are at Barrancabermeja, Magdalena Medio in Santander. We have Soacha in Cundinamarca, in the center part of Colombia, near Bogota. We have also Buenaventura on the Pacific shore of the Pacific Ocean. And we have also the last one with the border with Ecuador, Nariño, based on Pasto city. Those are our 5 regional offices, and the Bogota's one, where we have the administration and management processes.
All right, thank you. So there's a couple of other questions that maybe we will answer privately afterwards. Somebody's asking about a program on that a Canadian lawyer is involved with to improve labor laws, and maybe she can give us a little more information so that we can ask whether our panelists are aware of it. And then I just want to conclude, and there's a couple of others which we can answer privately. I want to conclude by just reading some of the comments as a way to thank our panelists. Somebody says, thank you for all that you're doing with the people to achieve these dreams and plans. Someone else is saying, thank you for all your hard work in helping the people to improve their lives, especially displaced people. Someone said, thank you so much for sharing your mission and signs of hope towards migrants and refugees. God bless you and your ministry. And somebody said, thank you, amazing webinar. So I think with those words, I can't really add much more because it's obvious people, even from the level of questions we have received, it's obviously people were very engaged because you both gave excellent presentations. But more than anything, I think what it shows is the heart with which you do this work. And that is what came through more than anything. And for that, I've got nothing but a big warm thank you to give you, not only for today, but for everything that you do, both Mauricio and Juana and the whole team.
Thank you, Jenny. And thank you for you all and all the audience. It has been nice to have the capacity or the possibility to share with you all.
Yes, and we look forward to a time when you can come to Canada and you will meet all these wonderful people that have been in our webinar, which you have not been able to see. And but we're still grateful for having this possibility. And a big thank you to my CJI team that has organized all of this and has done all the work to put it together and to make sure it run smoothly. I just showed up. So thank you, and we look forward to seeing you to our next webinar.
Okay, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you,
Bye.
bye.